Let me tell you what happens when you hire investigators to catch your wife cheating and they catch you instead. This one's satisfying.
Imagine sitting across a table from a man who just watched 6 hours of video evidence proving his wife is one of the most genuinely good people you have ever surveilled. She volunteers at soup kitchens. She visits sick children in hospitals. She has never so much as glanced at another man. And this guy, this smug, silk-suited, stupidly wealthy man, looks up from all of it and says, "So you did not catch her cheating. What exactly was the point of hiring you?" That is where this story begins. And I promise you, by the time it ends, that man will have lost his house, his money, his dignity, and whatever remained of his reputation.
The audacity of that question alone. He hired investigators to find dirt on a saint and got mad they told him the truth.
About 3 years before that moment, a man with more money than sense walked into the offices of a private security and investigations company and made what he assumed was a simple business transaction. He believed his wife was being unfaithful. He wanted proof. He wanted that proof so he could file for divorce on solid footing and presumably walk away from the marriage with the upper hand. The contract was set for 6 months. The payment was substantial, the kind of number that makes a five-man investigative unit genuinely motivated to do excellent work. Cameras went up throughout the couple's large home. A tracker was placed in the wife's car. At least one member of the team was tailing her every single day. This was the job, and they were good at it. What they found, though, was not what anyone expected. Day after day, week after week, the surveillance painted a picture of a woman who was, without exaggeration, remarkable. She spent mornings at a soup kitchen ladling out food to strangers. She spent afternoons at a children's hospital sitting with sick kids. She helped local churches organize food drives. She was warm and consistent and completely genuinely decent. The team had seen enough marriages and enough surveillance footage to know the difference between someone performing goodness and someone who simply was good. This woman was the real thing. And then there was the husband, the man who hired them, because while they were watching her, they were also watching the house. And what the cameras inside that house picked up was a very different kind of picture. He brought women home, multiple women, sometimes more than one in a single day. The very man who had hired a professional team to investigate his wife for infidelity was, on camera, doing exactly what he had accused her of. At the 4-month mark, the team sat down with the client for what is called a three-quarter report, a detailed debrief covering everything gathered so far. 6 hours, video, audio, the full picture. The wife had one speeding ticket and a couple of parking violations to her name. That was it. Nothing else. The captain of the unit, a man described as carrying the kind of serious, unshakable authority that you feel in a room before he even speaks, laid it all out plainly and professionally. And when it was done, the client just sat there looking like someone had told him a joke he did not understand. He asked with visible irritation what exactly the point of hiring them had been if they had not caught her cheating. The captain did not flinch. He looked the man dead in the eye and said, "You hired us to investigate your wife. You are unhappy that your wife is an honest and faithful woman." There was a silence in that room that must have felt like a verdict. The client stood up, grabbed his jacket, and told them the contract was over. He told them to come collect their equipment when his wife was not home and to consider the whole thing done.
He literally got mad that his wife was loyal. That is a level of entitlement I genuinely cannot wrap my head around.
A week later, they did exactly that. They pulled the cameras, packed the equipment, and closed the file. And then came payday. The unit got a call to come into the office for an emergency meeting on payday. What they found when they got there was simple and infuriating. The client had pulled the funding. He refused to pay the completion balance owed on the contract. The team would receive their base salary because the company covered that regardless. But the completion bonus, the substantial sum that gets divided among the investigators at the end of a successfully completed contract, was gone. The man was refusing to pay on the grounds that they had not delivered the result he wanted. He had hired professionals to find truth, received exactly that, and then decided truth was not the product he was looking for. The team went to lunch that day, all 5 of them, furious, sitting around a table trying to figure out what to do next. They talked about what they had. They had 6 months of footage. They had everything that happened in that house. The idea of blackmail came up briefly and was dismissed just as fast, because these were people who took their profession seriously and knew exactly where that line was. But then someone thought about the wife. She did not know any of this. She had no idea her husband had hired investigators to build a case against her. She had no idea that while she was out volunteering and doing good in the world, cameras were recording her husband bringing other women through their front door. She was living inside a lie she had not been told yet. And the man who had hired this team specifically to expose wrongdoing had used the investigation as a weapon against the one person who had actually done nothing wrong. So he reached out to her. He set a meeting, sat down across from her, and explained everything. He showed her the footage. She cried for half an hour. He described it as watching someone's entire world crack open in real time, which it was. It was not a comfortable moment. It was not triumphant. It was just honest. And sometimes honesty is the hardest thing to give someone. He gave her a copy of every single piece of evidence the team had collected, his business card, and a strong recommendation to find herself a very good lawyer.
This is the turn. This is the moment where the whole story shifts from revenge to something that actually means something.
Fast forward about 6 months. The company took the client to court. The charges were fraud, breach of contract, and unpaid dues. His lawyer's entire defense rested on the argument that the team had failed to deliver the result he had paid for. The judge was not impressed. The investigators had not been hired to manufacture evidence. They had not been hired to produce a specific outcome. They had been hired to observe and report, and that is precisely what they had done. The company won. The payment that had been withheld was recovered through the courts, and the man who had tried to use a professional investigative unit as a personal attack dog, and then refused to pay them when they refused to perform on command, got to watch it all come apart in front of a judge. But that was only part of the story, because as he was walking out of the courthouse that day, the wife found him. She wanted to thank him. And what she told him about what had happened on her end was, frankly, extraordinary. Because of the evidence she had been given, her divorce proceedings were airtight. She walked out of that marriage with a large family home, both cars, and a significant cash settlement. The man who had tried to build a case against his faithful wife ended up losing almost everything he owned to her instead.
That could have been the end of it, and honestly, it would have been more than enough. But this story has an update, and the update is almost too good to be real. A few years later, he got a message asking if he had heard from the wife recently. A number of people wanted to know how she was doing. He made some calls, tracked her down, and they agreed to meet at a local coffee shop. When he walked in, she was already there, sitting with her new husband, glowing in a way that people do when they have genuinely rebuilt something beautiful. She had 2 daughters who were, by all accounts, charming and well-behaved, and she was expecting a 3rd child, a boy.
Over coffee, she told him something that made him laugh out loud. After the divorce was finalized and the house became hers, the ex-husband's family came calling almost immediately. The house had been in the family for generations, they said. They wanted it back. They made her an offer, $250,000. She had a realtor come and do a proper appraisal. The actual market value came back at close to $1.5 million. But when she went back to the family, she told them the realtor had valued it at $5 million. She said she would be listing it at that price, but would offer them first right of purchase at a discounted rate of $3.5 million as a gesture of goodwill because they were practically family. They paid her in cash. The next day,
She looked that family dead in the face, called it a discount, and they handed over $3.5 million. I need a moment.
as the evening wound down and he was getting ready to leave, she reached into her purse and pulled something out. He thought she was about to offer him money and started to raise his hand to stop her. But it was not money. It was his old business card, worn and kept, the one he had given her years ago at the lowest point of her life. She told him she had tried to call the number on it about a year before to thank him, but the line had been disconnected. She asked him to update his contact information. He asked her why she wanted to keep his number, and she just smiled and said he was the kind of person she'd like to keep in her back pocket, just in case. He wrote down his number and was invited to bring his family to dinner at her home that Friday. The very next morning, his boss called. There was a new 5-year employment contract on the table, high profile and extremely well paid. The wife's new husband, it turned out, was a magistrate. He had arranged for the company to be contracted directly through the courts, with a specific provision that the man who had shown his wife the truth all those years ago would be appointed as the new unit captain, reporting directly to the judiciary. A cup of coffee and an honest conversation had turned into the most significant professional opportunity of his career. Some people try to weaponize investigators against the people who least deserve it. Some people refuse to pay when the truth does not match the lie they wanted told. And some people forget, completely and catastrophically, that the people they cheated were professionals who spent 6 months documenting every single thing that happened in that house. The wife got the house, the cars, the settlement, and eventually a new life that looks a whole lot better than the one she was rescued from. The company got paid twice over, and the man who started all of this by trying to destroy a faithful woman lost his money, his marriage, his home, and whatever story he had been telling himself about who he was. If you have ever doubted whether doing the right thing pays off, let this one sit with you for a while. And if you have a story that proves the same thing, drop it below. I want to hear it.